Good morning, Changemakers, and welcome to the Environmental Changemaker series brought to you by Environmental Scouts. You are in for a real treat today as we hear from Alison Waliszewski, Program Director from Gyres. Today, Alison's going to teach us all about the history of plastics. She'll also be back next Thursday to teach us about watersheds and how pollutants get into our waterways and oceans. I am Dr. Adriana Glazner, co-founder of Environmental Scouts. If our two previous episodes highlighting pet rescue and youth activism, then by now you know the reason that we're here. Brooke's idea for an environmental club for kids has quickly grown into an opportunity to connect individual change makers and nonprofit organizations to share their educational resources and ideas for an amplified impact. So we proudly bring you the Environmental Changemaker series to amplify those voices and hopefully help you find yours. Hi, Brooke.
Hi, Dr. Glazner.
How are you today?
I'm doing great, thanks.
Good. I know this issue is really important to you, and you and I have talked about it before, but can you tell your audience for a moment, why is the issue of plastic so important to you and your family?
I'd just like to thank Ms. Waliszewski for talking to us about plastic. It's such an important topic. It may seem like a really boring one, but actually, it's interesting to know how it's become part of our everyday lives. I love the Trash Academy episodes on the Gyres website. Thank you for all your resources for learning.
Of course. We're so thrilled that you tuned in, Brooke, and that you invited me here today to talk a little bit more to your friends and your friends at home about plastics and specifically about the history of plastic.
Aw, that's great. Brooke, thank you so much for giving Gyres and their Trash Academy a shout out. That is absolutely the inspiration for today's talk. If you want to check out their resources at 5gyres.org, they have so many things there for kids like Brooke and adults like me. Also, please like this video and subscribe below. You can follow us, Environmental Scouts, on social media. You can find us on Facebook at Environmental Scouts and on Instagram at EnviroScoutsLA. So a little bit about Alison. She has an amazing background, and we're so lucky to have her. Alison has 9 years of experience managing community-based programming for arts, cultural, education, environmental nonprofits, a museum educator in Baltimore, and a volunteer manager for Blue Water, an NGO that improves local water quality monitoring, pollution, working with community members to fix city infrastructure through urban forestry. I'm sure she could speak more eloquently to all of that. Alison, prior to joining Gyres Institute, worked in a fundraising capacity role for 2 LA-based social services and education nonprofits. So she'll tell us a little bit more about her current work with Gyres and what they're doing to eliminate plastics in the ocean. But because this is such a complicated issue, we get Alison twice, and today she'll focus mostly on the history of plastics and then come back next week to discuss a little bit more of the effects. So without further ado, Alison Waliszewski.
Hi, friends. It's so nice to be here today. Brooke, Adriana, thank you so much for inviting me to talk a little bit about the history of plastic. Now, I think most of us use plastic on a daily basis, whether we realize it or not, whether we want to or not. But did you ever wonder, what is the history of plastic? Why was it made? And let's learn a little bit more about plastic. So without further ado, let's tune in and focus and learn just a little bit more about the history of plastic and how it ties into the general life cycle of plastic. So it all started with these 2 inventors, Alexander Parks and John Wesley Hyatt. In 1862, Alexander Parks unveiled his amazing invention at the Great International Exhibition in London, England. The material, called Parkesine, let's practice that together, Parkesine, you got it, was an organic material derived from cellulose that once heated could be molded and retain its shape when cooled. Now, fast forward 7 years later to 1869, when John Wesley Hyatt had been experimenting with Parkesine. He was trying to invent a cheap new material for game pieces, like checkers or chess pieces or billiard balls. Here we go. So this is an example of checkers pieces or billiard balls. And Hyatt succeeded in his invention with this new material that was called celluloid, but he didn't know it, but it would forever change our world. Back then, these game pieces had actually been made of ivory. Do you know what ivory comes from? Ivory comes from an elephant's tusks, and it is very expensive, and it can also lead to animal cruelty. The image on the right is a tortoiseshell comb made from the shell of tortoises and turtles, which is also not very animal friendly. Hard to believe, early types of plastic might have actually helped certain animals, including sea turtles. Wow. Over the next few decades, celluloid and similar forms of plastic started being used for all sorts of new products, such as for film, for photographs, piano keys, or even false teeth. Wow, can you imagine that? Then, in 1907, a new form of plastic was invented. It was called Bakelite. Let's say that one together. Bakelite. Bakelite. And it was an incredible new material. It was so strong and durable. It could withstand heat and electricity. It was used for all sorts of items like telephones, hair dryers, radios, clocks, cameras, and microphones. Throughout the decades and more, different types of plastic were invented for new and different uses. But it wasn't until World War II that modern plastic really became mass-produced once the military realized how useful it could be, like using nylon for making parachutes. From our skies to our thighs, we still use nylon today for items like fabric, clothing, carpets, and sports equipment. Do you use nylon at all? Do you use it? Let's think. I know I use it when I put on a pair of stockings. These materials were not only better alternatives at the time, but they also advanced aerospace, communications technology, and were used in military equipment during World War II, saving millions of lives. Plastic was a miracle material back then. It was strong, but it was also lightweight, durable, and it could be molded into and used for so many things. So, what changed? The world of plastics forever changed after World War II, when large industries and companies that had been making plastics for military equipment needed to find a new way to sell the material. So they shifted their customer base and started making lots of everyday items out of plastic. Everything from cars to furniture to clothes and appliances were made from plastic. Wow. Before the plastic explosion, Americans had a more use it up, wear it out, and make do mentality. Think about how we talk about reuse and recycle today. But more and more, as plastic flooded the market, we went plastic crazy! Disposable or single-use plastic was increasingly used for all kinds of food products and more. Disposable did not only become commonplace, it was celebrated without thinking through what the unintended consequences might be. Single-use culture became a part of our collective identity, and as we played a huge influence on how the American family became dependent on plastics for daily use across all aspects of life. In 1973, the first disposable polyethylene plastic bottle was created and used for beverages. We now produce more than over 20,000 bottles every second. Can you imagine that? Bam, 20,000 bottles. Bam, 40,000 bottles. They're being produced every single second. Very quickly, we became addicted to disposable plastic items like cups, bags, straws, single-use containers because they're cheap, easy to use, they kept our food and our beverages fresh, and were everywhere. But of course, there's also the bad news. We've doubled our plastic production tonnage in less than 2 decades. And that number isn't just creeping up, it's skyrocketing, with some of the world's largest corporations continually pumping out plastic every single day, every single minute, every single second. By 2050, there is projected to be a 4-fold increase in the tonnage. Wow, that's a lot. And although plastic hasn't been around for a very long time, we've learned a lot about it since then. We've learned that there is no way, and that the more we use, the more ends up in our environment, choking our waterways and over 1,200 species of different animals. These disposable products come with a huge hidden and externalized costs. We've learned that plastic isn't as easily recyclable as we've been led to believe, with less than 10% of all plastics actually getting recycled. Let's stop. 10%. Think about how much plastic you use and dutifully recycle every single week that you put out for the recycling truck to pick up. Only 10% of that plastic is actually getting recycled. We've created so much more plastic and it's become unmanageable, so we started to send it to other countries. And we've learned that 99% of plastic is made from fossil fuels. It hurts our planet and our communities that live at points of extraction, manufacturing, or use disposal and incineration. So now that we know more about the collateral damage that comes with relying on plastic, what can we do better? This is one of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou. We can't do much about what happened in the past, but how can this information influence our future actions and decisions? It's important to think about plastics in this way so that we can better understand how we became so dependent on them and why and how systems have gone wrong. The story of plastics shows us how exponential growth without stopping to think about long and unintended consequences can turn a solution into a big problem. What would we do differently knowing what we know now? What can we do and what can we adopt for closed loop and reusable systems? And how can we slow down and even stop the flow of plastic? Now, change makers, I have a challenge for you. We may not realize it, but as a result of plastic's history, we use plastic pretty much every day. It's still in our electronics like phones and computers, in cars, airplanes, in food packaging, and even in our clothing. We are living synthetic lives and have become very dependent upon plastics. Next week, we'll take a closer look at watersheds and how plastic moves through our ecosystems. But what I would encourage you today is take a look at 2 or 3 or 4 of the different items you use today, maybe some different soap, maybe it's a plastic water bottle full of your favorite beverage, and think, how can I either refuse, reuse, or source a different type of material? When I'm in the grocery store with my family, could I ask my parents to make a different choice and choose something that's either made out of cardboard or paper or metal or aluminum, where aluminum can be recycled endlessly? So many different options, and that's why I'm so excited to talk more about this with you as we keep going. Excellent. Thank you all for tuning in.
Thank you so much, Allison. Brooke, what'd you think of that?
That was so good. I was so...
Do you think you have some friends who can learn from what Allison just taught us?
Yes, even I learned something new from that. Oh my gosh, that was so awesome.
Oh, great. Brooke, can you tell us one new thing that you learned?
Let's see. Well, I actually thought it was 9% that got recycled. Turns out it's 10%, but less than 10. But
you were pretty close, though.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask if that was still accurate, like 9%, but you answered that question for me already.
Well, Brooke, that's a really good question, because right now with the pandemic, we have an increase in single-use plastics and disposable single-use utensils and cutlery when we get takeout food, or even just in the protective personal equipment that we use, like masks. So there probably is even much more of a decrease in the amount that we're actually recycling. And most municipalities have actually stopped and halted recycling altogether right now. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't stop sorting our recycling and our goods and really continuing that practice, because it's still very important.
Interesting. Allison, is that why when I got a grocery delivery a few months ago, my groceries came in single-use plastic bags, even though California has a bag ban?
Absolutely. So, that's actually a great question. So California during the pandemic put a halt on all reusable bags. So right now, plastics and the plastic industry have really been promoted as a safer alternative to reusables when that's actually not 100% true. As long as we wash our reusables in the same, with soap and hot water, they're generally just as safe as single-use plastic with proper care and cleaning.
That's really good to know. I have a few other questions. Brooke, should I go for it or do you have any more?
I still have questions.
Oh, great. You go first.
Okay. So what numbers of plastic can be recycled? Like I'm seeing on the bottom, there's a number and the recycling sign. And I know now that those numbers stand for different kinds of plastic, but which can actually be recycled?
Absolutely. And Brooke, you bring up a really good point. So those 3 arrows that you see that kind of go in a circle or a triangle with all of your different materials? Did you know that that doesn't actually mean recycling? That symbol with the numbers in it just help identify the different types of materials. Now, depending on your municipality and what company actually manages your waste, so your waste management company, who comes and picks up your trash, picks up your recycling, what type of recycling centers do you have in your neighborhood, in your community? Different ones will recycle different materials. Now, I can tell you the absolute worst plastic. Actually, would you like to guess? What do you think? Which number do you think is the worst plastic?
I know it's styrofoam. That one's the worst, but I can't remember its number. 6. Oh, I think it's 6. Yeah.
That's correct. Number 6. So number 6, plastic number 6, which we actually call polystyrene. How about we all practice that together? Can we all say polystyrene?
Polystyrene.
Okay, let's give it one more go for our friends at home. Let's all say it together. Polystyrene. Very good. So polystyrene is the most often used to make disposable or expanded polystyrene, which we call styrofoam. Styrofoam is often used for drinking cups, takeout clamshell food containers, and plastic picnic cutlery and foam packaging. Think about when you get peanuts and they're made out of that crunchy styrofoam material, that polystyrene. So polystyrene is actually, it's not recyclable. It's one of the worst offending types of plastic. And polystyrene can even leach into your food products when you heat it up in the microwave. So if you ever get takeout food in a clamshell container, just make sure you remove your food and put it on a reusable microwavable safe surface, potentially like a ceramic plate. I think that's something that's really, really important. But Brooke, you are asking me, what are some of the easiest plastics to recycle? Now, I would say that, would you like to give it a guess? Which number?
1.
Close.
2.
Yeah, plastic number 2. So plastic number 2 is called high density polyethylene. Let's practice that together. High density
Polyethylene.
Polyethylene. That's confusing to me.
I know, it's a little bit difficult to say. We can say plastic.
I knew you were going to make us do that. Let's do it again.
Okay. High density.
High density.
Polyethylene.
Ethylene.
Okay, how about I give you guys its nickname? We can also just call it HDPE, or plastic number 2, HDPE. So high density polyethylene, or HDPE plastic, is a stiff plastic used to make milk jugs, detergents, and oil bottles, toys, and also some like stiffer or more sturdy plastic bags. It is also the most commonly recycled plastic, and it is considered one of the safest forms of plastic. It's relatively simple and a cost-effective process to recycle high-density polyethylene plastic for secondary use. And this plastic itself is very hard-wearing. It doesn't really break down under exposure to sunlight or extreme types of heating or freezing. And it's for this reason that high-density polyethylene is used to make picnic tables, waste bins, park benches, bed liners for trucks, and other products that require a lot more weather and water resistance, and that really need to stand up to your everyday wear and tear.
Okay, I get that. A lot of stuff that's used to make.
Absolutely. Hey, Brooke, can you think of anything else that we might use or that you might use high density polyethylene for, or that your friends might use?
Let's see, scissors. I know scissors I've seen have like when those handles are really stiff, they're not bendy,
Absolutely, absolutely. Great example. Brooke, or Adriana, do you have any other questions about plastic?
I do, but I just want to make sure I give my youngest changemaker friend the opportunity. Brooke, is it okay if I jump in?
Oh yeah, you can jump in.
Awesome,
Sure.
thanks. So since we're talking about recycling, I wanted to ask you, Allison, about the limitations of recycling, not just in terms of which plastics can be recycled, but unlike some other materials that we recycle, like glass or metal, recycled plastics aren't able to continually serve the same purpose after recycling. Can you talk to us a little bit about the concept of downcycling? Am I getting that correct?
Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it. So basically, with recycling, now I think Brooke and friends at home and Adriana, I'm pretty sure we all know. Well, we've already talked about recycling. Only about 10% of plastics get recycled, but the plastic that actually does get recycled, how many times do you think it can be recycled?
Once.
Exactly. Just about once. And do you think that, I'll ask a different question. Do you think that it is profitable for us to recycle?
No.
That's correct. So right now we're actually seeing a major decrease in recycling because it's just not profitable for companies and recycling centers to be recycling. They have a lot of plastic and a lot of plastic pollution trash that is just sitting there waiting to be recycled for years and years and years because there is such a glut in the market that material producers have an overload of what's actually available. So, there's just so much plastic available, and the amount that continually gets produced and doesn't get reused and gets tossed away, and the plastic that even ends up in a recycling center, very little of it actually gets recycled. Now, one thing that we can do to decrease the amount of plastics is let's talk about the 6 R's. The 6 R's, rethink. So let's rethink the materials that we use. Let's think about how we use plastics on a daily basis. Number 2, refuse. If you can, say no to plastic. One great example might be, if you're going and getting takeout food and they hand you plastic utensils, you can say, oh, no, thank you. I don't need plastic utensils. Or if you're in a restaurant and you get a cup and they give you a straw, you can say, oh, no, thank you. I don't need a straw. So if we refuse our single-use plastic, we can really cut down on consumption. So that's one thing that friends at home can do, that you can do, that I can do. And if we all do it, we can make a significant decrease in the amount and in the amount of plastic pollution waste that gets used on a daily basis. Now, that also goes into our next R, which is reduce. We want to reduce the amount of plastic that's actually produced. So we want to choose other materials. So if you can, choose other more sustainable materials. Think like paper cups that aren't lined with BPA or any other type of plastics. Reduce the amount of paper or plastic bags that you use at a grocery store if you can. So think about bringing your own bags when you go to a grocery store. And then the next R brings us to reuse and repair. So if we reuse our plastic goods, if we reuse as much of everything as we can, it helps slow down the just our general plastic pollution consumption overall. But if you can reuse or repair, let's say maybe a toy or a tool that's made of plastic, then do your absolute best to reuse it or repair it as much as possible. Then this brings us to our next R, which is recycle. So once you've reused and repaired your plastic goods as much as possible, Then you recycle. Then after recycling, the last R is replace. So replacing is our last R and kind of our last option, and that would be where you're really disposing of your plastic goods.
Mm.
When you replace something, I would say excellent. Think about how you can replace it with a different, more sustainable material.
Yeah,
That's great. Alison, would you say that? So, am I understanding correctly? These are in order of sort of the first best thing we should do down to sort of the last option. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Brooke, were you going to say something?
Yes, it was. When we go to restaurants, we do reuse our own containers. We bring our own containers in case there's leftover food. We just put, and also we have our favorite Italian restaurant. Me and my sister like to get they have these little cups of juice for kids, and they give in these little plastic cups with straws every time. And instead, we just ask, can you just put the juice in a regular glass cup that they use for the adults with no straw?
Absolutely.
And my mom was kind of angry because they were giving us plastic straws without asking first, and then later they changed it to paper straws. And my mom said we still shouldn't use them because you don't really need it. So that's what we've been doing.
Exactly. Well, Brooke, I want to give you a high five for making that choice in refusing, and then also let's give your favorite restaurant a high five as well, because they made a sustainable choice. And they replaced a plastic material with another material, paper, which is biodegradable and compostable. So, but your mom is also completely right. If we can reduce our single-use products, that is the number one choice we should make. So, we don't need a straw to drink water or to drink your favorite beverage or juice or milk. We can just drink it straight out of a cup. So, amazing job.
Yeah, you and your family, Brooke, are definitely good at the rethink and the refuse. And I'm really proud of you guys for that, because when I was growing up, it was, and I'm sure Alison knows too, it was recycle, reuse, reduce, right? And I'm glad to hear there's so many more R's that we can take advantage of before we get to the others.
Absolutely.
So, Alison, in your opinion, you've given us just so many valuable tips. What do you think is the number one, if you had to pick, the number one small change that young change makers can make to reduce the amount of plastic that they're introducing into the environment?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say number one would be refuse. So because young people are always presented with a lot of single-use plastic options. So maybe at school, if you buy lunch, perhaps your school gives you, single-use plastic utensils. Potentially see if you can bring your own, or maybe talk to your teachers, talk to your family, talk to the PTA at your school about seeing if you can replace your single-use plastics with reusables, or at the very least, see if you're allowed to bring your own set of maybe wooden or utensils, wooden or metal utensils. I think that is one major impact, one major choice that you as a young person, as a young change maker, can do on your own. And then I would say potentially the next major thing we could do is to learn more about the issues and tell your friends about things. Tell your friends, tell your families, advocate in your neighborhood, your community, in your school for how you can eliminate single-use plastics.
Do you think you can do that, Brooke?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. Well, this has just been so much fun. I know for me, I've learned so much from Alison and from Brooke, and I'm continually inspired by change makers of all ages. And I just can't wait to see Alison back next Thursday to talk about what happens when plastics go into our oceans and what we can do about that. Alison, any preview for us?
Okay, I will give you guys a question, and then I want you to think about it, and then answer me next week. Are there large islands of plastic and garbage floating around in the Pacific Ocean?
Don't answer yet, Brooke. I know you know. I know you know, but that'll be a little cliffhanger for the rest of us. So thank you so much. Audience, you can follow 5 Gyres on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at 5 Gyres. one of the few organizations that I think has a uniform handle across the platform. So that's lovely. You can also find more information on 5gyres.org. And again, please join us the rest of this week and next week as we discuss all kinds of topics with change makers. Tomorrow, we're going to be learning from Jeremy Goss from Big Life. And we are just so thrilled that he is going to share all the way from Kenya his expertise on poaching, extinction, and habitat loss for wildlife. And as we talk about all of these issues are not separate. They intersect to just give us so many motivations, no matter what your entry point is into environmentalism and climate activism, there is something for everybody. So thank you so much. And Allison, thank you. Brooke, thank you. Great job today. We'll see you guys again.
All right.
Thank you so much for having me. Bye, friends.